Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Zhang. Here are today's top stories. The Russia-Ukraine war still high on the agenda during the NATO summit. Find out what world leaders are saying. California heatwave temperatures continue breaking records this week. Americans across the country also facing high heat warnings. The driver involved in the Malibu crash, which took the life of a rideshare driver, has been identified as a 32-year-old social media influencer. First up, the Russia-Ukraine war is still high on the agenda during the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. What Secretary of State Antony Blinken says about military aid and Ukraine's membership bid.
Today was the second day of the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. Secretary of State Antony Blinken addressed the latest NATO military aid to Ukraine and the country's bid for NATO membership during a public forum this morning.
As we speak, the transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands, and those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer to make sure that Ukraine can continue to effectively defend itself against the Russian aggression. The fact that NATO also requires, as Ukraine moves irreversibly along the path to membership, that it continue reforms, that's the strongest guarantee that the reforms that the Ukrainian people so strongly support will continue and will deepen. And that results in a Ukraine that is strong, that is independent, and that is the best possible rebuke to Vladimir Putin.
Blinken assured Ukraine that it will be allowed to join NATO, but only after its war with Russia ends. As the NATO summit progresses, the alliance's Secretary General said member states are expected to agree on a substantial package for Ukraine, and they would also expand other partnerships, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and UK's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer were on Capitol Hill, meeting with a bipartisan group of center leaders on the sidelines of the NATO summit. President Biden met with Starmer in person for the first time at the White House. Former President Trump has challenged President Biden to another debate, this time one without moderators. The presumptive GOP nominee issued the challenge at a rally in Florida. Here's Trump last night.
But this time it will be man-to-man, no moderators, no holds barred. Just name the place, anytime, anywhere.
Trump also challenged Biden to a golf match, referencing their exchange during June's debate. The Biden campaign reacted, saying the president does not have time for weird antics. It stated Biden's busy leading America and defending the free world. Biden and Trump are set to debate again on September 10th. That debate will be hosted by ABC News. Biden's campaign says the president plans to attend. Senator Marco Rubio joins former President Trump at a Florida rally. The meeting comes just days before Trump is expected to announce his vice presidential pick.
That's a lot, Marco. That's a lot, Marco. I think they probably think I'm going to be announcing that Marco is going to be vice president. I don't know. Because that's a lot of press.
Rubio spoke on economic and foreign policy, highlighting what he considers Trump's successes. Known for his tough stance on China, Rubio has introduced several bills targeting the Chinese Communist Party. He has called for lobbyists to choose between representing the U.S. or China and urged investigations into Chinese companies. Rubio emphasizes the need to counter China's influence on technology, trade, and national security, advocating for stringent measures against the CCP. We have more updates on actor Alec Baldwin's manslaughter trial. Baldwin is in court in Santa Fe, New Mexico, as opening statements began today. Prosecutors in their opening statement argued that Baldwin violated gun safety rules. They said Baldwin was reckless on the movie set. Prosecutors said they will present evidence that Baldwin went off script and failed to follow basic industry standards for firearm safety. 12 jurors selected yesterday are seated. There are 4 alternate jurors. Baldwin faces up to 18 months in prison for one charge of involuntary manslaughter. He is accused of the fatal shooting of a cinematographer on the movie set of Rust. He has pleaded not guilty. The armorer of the movie, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, is serving an 18-month prison sentence. She is seeking a retrial.
A persisting heat wave continues to scorch Southern California, prompting the National Weather Service to issue multiple weather alerts. Areas across the northwest U.S. also feeling the heat. NTD's Christina Corona highlights the areas most affected.
The record-breaking heat wave affecting Antelope Valley and Los Angeles County is expected to peak this week, with temperatures soaring over 110 degrees. According to the National Weather Service, Lancaster and Palmdale set a new record Wednesday for the most consecutive days over 110 degrees, with triple digits expected to extend into the weekend. Lancaster is forecasted to reach 112 degrees and Palmdale 110 degrees. An excessive heat warning is in effect until at least 9 p.m. Saturday for the Antelope Valley, Interstate 5 corridor, Western San Gabriel Mountains, and Highway 14 corridor. A similar warning is in place until 9 p.m. Thursday for the Santa Clarita Valley, Santa Monica Mountains recreational area, Calabasas, Agora Hills, Valencia, East Los Angeles, the San Gabriel Valley, and parts of the San Fernando Valley, including Burbank and Topanga. In Washington, the Department of Transportation shared images of heat-buckled roads. US 195 south of Rosalia buckled at the Horn School rest area, with crews working on repairs to prevent further damage. Extreme heat causes roads to expand and contract, more with prolonged heat waves. High heat asphalt roads become more fluid-like as temperatures rise, resulting in ruts when cars drive on them. And in the desert city of Las Vegas, Nevada, residents endured the 5th consecutive day over 115 degrees. In Oregon, the state medical examiner's office said high temperatures are expected to have caused 8 deaths. On the East Coast, the Philadelphia area, northern Delaware, and nearly all of New Jersey were under an excessive heat warning Wednesday, with temperatures hovering around the mid-90s. Over 142 million people across the U.S. were under heat alerts Wednesday. To stay cool during the heat wave, visit local cooling centers, libraries, or even air-conditioned stores. Beaches offer the best relief, with coastal temperatures expected to remain in the mid to high 70s. Christina Corona, NTD News, Arcadia.
Drivers for ride-hailing companies in Massachusetts are pushing ahead with what they describe as a first-of-its-kind ballot questions that could win them union rights if approved. It's part of an effort to have better labor laws.
The push comes as a landmark settlement last month, guaranteeing that Uber and Lyft drivers will earn a minimum pay standard of $32.50 per hour in Massachusetts. Supporters of the measure last week delivered the final batch of signatures needed to land a spot on the November ballot. In a July 3rd statement, April Verrett, president of the Service Employees International Union, said SEIU is fully committed to backing the courage and creativity of rideshare drivers as they rewrite the rules in the face of labor law that has counted them out and written them out for too long. The ballot in question, if approved, would define active drivers as those who completed more than the median number of rides in the previous 6 months. Once a union signs up 5% of active drivers in a bargaining unit, it would get a list of all eligible workers and block any other union from being recognized without an election. If a union then signs up 25% of eligible voters in a bargaining unit, it becomes the certified bargaining representative, and there would be an election.
The driver and victim have been identified in the fatal July 4th collision in Malibu. Christina Corona tells us more about the tragic story.
Authorities reported that social media influencer Summer Wheaton was involved in the fatal car collision on Pacific Coast Highway last Thursday. According to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the 32-year-old wellness influencer was driving a 2019 Mercedes-Benz after leaving an event at Nobu around 10:20 p.m. when her car crossed the center median for unknown reasons and crashed head-on with a 2020 Cadillac Escalade. Both Wheaton and the passenger in the Cadillac were taken to the hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. The driver of the Cadillac has been identified as 44-year-old Martin Okiki, a rideshare driver. He died on the scene on the Pacific Coast Highway west of Carbon Canyon. This incident comes during the city's ongoing efforts to address safety on Pacific Coast Highway. Last month, legislation allowing the installation of speed cameras at 5 spots along Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu moved closer to approval. Senator Ben Allen notes that while Pacific Coast Highway is one of California's most beautiful and picturesque roadways,
but literally every couple of months, the community is devastated by yet another fatal traffic accident with all sorts of serious crashes happening in between.
He said since he first introduced the bill, several people have already died on this road. Since 2010, 61 people have been killed in vehicle accidents along the exceedingly dangerous stretch of the highway.
Crash data from last year from the LA County Sheriff reports something like 127 property damage collisions, 93 injury collisions, 7 deaths. Primary factor in all of these incidences was high vehicle speeding.
Police say an investigation into what caused the crash is underway. Christina Corona, NTD News.
We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. Democratic and Republican congressmen in California say reducing penalties would worsen organized retail theft. Some Californians talk about security. Today, the House passed a bill preventing non-citizens from voting in federal elections. From Death Valley to Alaska, a British explorer recounts its journey from one of the hottest and lowest places on Earth to a mountain peak. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Zhang. California congressmen on both sides of the aisle say reducing penalties only worsens organized retail crime. But what does the everyday Californian think? NTD's David Lam has the story.
Representatives Mike Garcia, a Republican, and Jimmy Panetta, a Democrat, said on Tuesday California's Proposition 47 is creating more problems than it's solving. Prop 47 was approved by voters in 2014, and it reduced charges and penalties for certain non-violent crimes.
I think police are not maybe able to catch enough of them. So even if the penalty was harsh, a lot of people think, I have a good chance of getting away with it. And maybe they do it once and they get away with it. So they think, this is kind of, not bad.
The measure reclassified certain crimes, such as stealing less than $950 of goods, changing from a felony to a misdemeanor when it first passed. It was designed to reduce the prison population and move funds towards schools and social programs. One person we spoke to said she witnessed shoplifting nearby her area.
I saw the clerk try to, get the guy to return the product. I think they need a loss prevention at their stores to help for stuff like that.
For years, safety advocates pushed to change the way Prop 47 works and to increase penalties for repeated crimes. Some have considered the law resulted in more organized shoplifting in the state.
I am from El Salvador, where a while back crime was pretty bad, and it was normal for every business to have an armed guard inside or outside or both, even restaurants, So it's not very nice, to see that happening, but maybe, I don't know, what else can they do?
Representatives Garcia, Panetta, and others are calling for federal involvement, which would have federal agencies work with local officials to bring retail crime networks to justice. David Lam, NTD News.
Earlier today, the House passed a bill along party lines to prevent non-citizens from voting in federal elections. Here's NTD's Arian Pastor with more on the bill.
The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or SAFE Act. Its goal is to prevent non-citizens from voting in federal elections. Speaker Mike Johnson talked about the bill on the House floor today.
Here's the number. 89% of Americans believe that only Americans should decide our elections. And that includes, by the way, 82% of Democrats, 80% of Black and African American voters, 78% of Hispanic Latino voters.
The bill would make it so that voters have to provide proof of U.S. citizenship to cast ballots in federal elections. And to register to vote, one would need to present a passport or a photo ID. In case of a photo ID, the potential voter also needs documents that show that the person was born in the United States. for example, a birth certificate. Democrats say the bill is not needed because there is no proof of widespread fraud being committed. They also criticize that potential voters have to show birth certificates, pointing out that driver's licenses or military IDs should be allowed too. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
As the NATO summit continues in Washington, let's recap some conversations. President Biden had opened the summit by promising new weapons to Ukraine.
3 new Patriot missile batteries from the U.S., Germany, and Romania, and another long-range air defense system from Italy is what Ukraine is set to receive. President Biden, in his opening speech at the NATO summit, said the U.S. would make sure Ukraine goes to the front of the line for military aid. The U.S. and other countries are also providing Ukraine with short and medium-range systems to intercept Russian missiles and drones. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he would fight for decisive actions from the U.S. and Europe to help Ukraine. He said the U.S.'s recent action to give Kyiv the go-ahead to use American weapons to strike Russian territory was decisive.
If American leadership makes a step forward and allows us to destroy Russian military aircrafts on their bases, this will also yield an instant result. And we are waiting for this step.
One day before the summit, Ukrainian officials said Russia struck the country's largest children's hospital. Ukraine said strikes across the country killed at least 42 people. Biden called the strikes a horrific reminder of Russia's brutality. Zelensky in his speech alluded to the possibility of former President Trump winning the presidency in November. Trump has previously said he would push to end the war if elected.
Americans are waiting for November in Europe, Middle East, in the Pacific. The whole world is looking to autumn, looking to November. And truly speaking, Putin awaits November 2.
Biden honored NATO Secretary General as the summit kicked off in a surprise ceremony. He awarded Jens Stoltenberg with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's the U.S.'s highest civilian honor. Biden last year persuaded Stoltenberg to extend his tenure as Secretary General. Biden said Tuesday 1 billion people across the world will reap the rewards of his labor. Stoltenberg urged NATO countries to continue their support for Ukraine. He says there are no risk-free options in war. The biggest risk, he said, will be if Russia wins in Ukraine. The summit continues Wednesday and Thursday. President Biden is expected to hold a solo press conference on Thursday.
Most casual dining restaurants are having considerably lower returns, and many restaurant executives are saying business is down. Here's more.
Izzy Karish is the president of Hospitality Works, a firm that advises restaurants internationally. He says the same number of people are going out to eat, but they're ordering less.
Food prices are way up. Drink prices are way up. So going out to eat these days is very expensive. And what customers are doing, they're still going out at that same rate, but instead of getting one appetizer for 2 people, they're getting one appetizer and sharing.
Karish says half of his customers are restaurants that are failing, losing between $20,000 and $3 million a year. He and his team are helping them figure out what's wrong. Analyst Pete Jock says customer experience quality is at an all-time low in general throughout the U.S.
I'm paying more for products, services, but I'm not seeing that reflected in better value in the product or better service.
He believes the trend will continue if companies don't improve.
Complaints in restaurants about service are much higher than they used to be, and rightfully so. The level of service in the U.S. has fallen substantially.
Izzy Karish, the president of Hospitality Works, says the service in restaurants has gotten pretty bad. He says restaurants are struggling to find employees, and those they do find receive much less training.
We're going to briefly teach you how to talk to the guest, but as soon as that guest starts to ask any question, that server doesn't know. And the server doesn't know where the food is, how to pick it up, how to serve it to the table.
Harris says the main problem is that it's hard to find people, so businesses are just accepting lower standards.
A British explorer is easing back into his life in London. He became the second person to travel by human power from Death Valley, one of the hottest and lowest places on Earth, to the peak of Mount Denali in Alaska.
Ollie Frank journeyed over 3,500 miles by bike, skis, and foot across some of the continent's toughest terrain. The entire trek took him 64 days.
Really, it is the culmination of over a decade spent on doing expeditions around the world. building my knowledge, building my skill set, building my fitness that has allowed me to eventually pull this off. And so, yeah, it means that I'm only the second person to ever complete this journey in this century.
Ali Frank said his willpower and spirit were challenged daily.
And there were a million times throughout the journey when I thought, it's not going to happen, it's not possible, for all kinds of different reasons. Even when we were only 100 meters from the summit and it was within sight, there still could have been various things which could have prevented us from getting to the summit. And so, yeah, I almost had to pinch myself when I did.
The Explorer has a simple answer when followers on social media ask why he does it.
But as I reflect on the journey and the big question that many people ask me of why, well, this is my why. It's my 3-year-old daughter and my 1-year-old son. I hope this shows that with enough hard work, preparation and resilience, we can chase those biggest dreams.
Frank wants to become the first person in history to traverse from the lowest geographical point to the highest across 7 continents. He calls this mission the Ultimate 7.
Stay tuned for China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer coming up next. The U.S. moving to close a loophole in trade. President Biden announces the tariffs on Chinese metal coming in through Mexico. More on China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And that's all we've got for you tonight. We'd like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.